This week on Merchants of Change, we've got Chrissy Gikas. Chrissy played softball for the Endicott Gulls before she transitioned into her professional career. Today, she's the Sales Development Manager at Starburst, a leading open data lakehouse platform. Here she is, Chrissy Gikas.
I'm J.R. Butler, co-founder and CEO of The Shift Group, and you're listening to Merchants of Change. This is a podcast about transferring the skills and behaviors we acquire as athletes and military veterans into becoming a professional salesperson. Each week, we'll introduce you to a top performer who will help us understand how they became professional merchants of change.
What's up, kid? Today we got Chrissy Gikas. Is that right?
Yeah, you got it.
I love it. I love it. Chrissy, thank you for joining the show. So, foundationally, we started the podcast because we felt like our mission to help athletes and veterans would be best served by really just interviewing folks that have been through the transition, have found success in sales. So we always bring in former athletes and military veterans like yourself to kind of talk about their own journeys from their athletic career all the way through their current seat as a salesperson. So that's kind of the flow of the conversation. I was looking at your background. You're a softball player. Is that right?
Yeah. Yep, you got it.
I love it. What position did you play?
Middle infield, but mostly second base.
Nice.
Yeah.
What is your favorite memory from your softball career? I know that's a really broad question, but we like to start there.
I have a lot of really great ones. I think my favorite memory definitely has to come down to my freshman year. It's very cliche, but we won the championship. And it was my favorite because I honestly went into the season. I didn't expect to play. I was like, there's two seniors who are playing middle infield right now. I'm just going to learn as much as I can from them. And then fast forward, championship game, I'm starting at second base. I'm so scared. I'm on the bench, like in the corner in the between innings. I'm like trying to, stay calm, cool, collected. But it was just incredible to see the team have an awesome season. And even for myself, just really proud of myself that I was there. I did not expect to play, like I said, at all that season. And so, it was a 10-inning game. In softball, we play 7 innings, not 9 like baseball. So it was like 2 games in one, essentially, is what it felt like. But it was really great. And the baseball team won the same day. So just an awesome day on campus, nonetheless.
That is awesome. The champagne was popping up in Beverly, Massachusetts that day.
It was popping for sure. It was.
Yeah. More like Busch Light, but hey, that's okay, right?
We are too. Yep.
Oh, that's amazing. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but like my experience is that teams that win championships are usually the closest teams off the field or off the ice in my situation. So yeah. I imagine you guys had unbelievable leaders and just like a really close-knit team atmosphere. Is that fair?
Yeah, honestly, the girls I keep in touch with the most are from that season. Even the seniors, they taught me so much and they really took me under their wing. And I try to do that now as a leader. When I was a team lead, now I'm managing an SDR team, but I just felt really comfortable. They supported me. They believed in me. They knew that I should be out there. And that makes such a difference. And that's something that I've definitely translated over to my professional career. So I still keep in touch with the team. We talk about every single year on the anniversary. We always send funny pictures because obviously, really intense game, 10 innings just back and forth against our rivals. And the pictures are hilarious. So it's nice to catch up with them and send them back and forth every year.
That's awesome. I'm coming up on a 20-year anniversary from a league championship my sophomore year of college, and it was at the time, and even to this day, it's considered the biggest upset in college hockey history. But to your point, like all my most active group chats are from guys on that team, from seniors all the way to obviously guys in my class. So I can totally relate to that. Now, when you got out of Endicott, did you have a plan to like get into sales? Was that like kind of where you were headed right from the jump? Like how did that whole thing play out?
I have a funny career in terms of my academics. So I started out as a English major, I wanted to be a teacher, which is hilarious because I did it for an entire year. Like I was taking education classes, British literature. I'm like, this is just not for me. I had an internship with I think it was a senior class at Masconomet Regional High School. It was awesome, but my piece of advice for anyone is make sure you do have those internships because if I didn't have that, I probably would have graduated with an education degree. And so after I graduated, or I switched gears, I switched to business my sophomore year, and then I went to get my MBA because, like most collegiate athletes, we don't really know what we want to do after we graduate. And I was like, I'm going to get my MBA, just kind of buy myself some time, figure out what I want to do. And I had an internship my entire senior year. I actually accepted another internship with them that summer. And then I would kind of work for them while I was getting my MBA. And then I just kind of sat down one day and was like, I don't really like this. And I don't want to get my MBA just to buy some time. Like, I want to get out there and I want to make money. So I withdrew from my MBA in the middle of the summer. So I didn't even start. And I accepted a full-time position with a company called EBSCO. And I was an administrative assistant, just kind of dipping my toes in like sales, marketing. I thought I wanted to go the marketing route. I did that for 6 months and I was like, this just isn't for me. I wasn't happy and I just feel like I was comfortable and I was afraid of doing something that was going to make me feel uncomfortable, which essentially would have been a career in sales. But I knew just based on my personality and being an athlete that that's something I would thrive in. I was just kind of afraid to take that leap of faith.
Totally, totally. Did you, EBSCO, by the way, for our listeners, is a publishing company, which I know very well. I've sold them a lot of software in my past life. Was your first sales job at EBSCO, or did you move right into the tech world?
It wasn't necessarily. So I interned through a couple different departments. Their internship program was awesome. So you did a few weeks of marketing, a few weeks in sales. So you kind of cycled throughout. I wasn't cold calling. My first sales job was at a company called EF, or Education First, EF Tours. And the way I got into that is I actually Googled best places to work in Boston, which like is so silly looking back. And I like a lot of companies came up, like a Datadog and all these different companies. I'm looking into them, and the way that I kind of networked and got these interviews was I was looking for Endicott alumni. So I actually found an alumni at EF Tours. She played lacrosse, so we were both athletes, and I was like, okay, if she likes it, like we were pretty similar. We hung out around the same crowd. Like maybe I'll give it a whirl. So we had a long conversation. I ended up interviewing and I landed the job, and that's what kickstarted my sales career. And I just never looked back. Like I know that sales is just something that I'm going to continue to do, and it fits my personality just based on my athletic career and going forward.
How long were you in the MBA program before you like withdrew?
I didn't even start.
Well,
I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to do this for the time being, just until I figure out what I want to do. And I am embarrassed to admit this, but like when you're an athlete in college, that's kind of all you care about. Like, especially in the spring, I didn't really have time to like interview really. My whole first semester, senior year at Endicott, was my internship, Monday through Thursday, 9 to 5. And after that, I was like, all right, I'm in the zone. Like, this is my last season as an athlete ever. And I didn't really think about a career after that. I was like, I'll get my MBA, I'll figure it out then. Yeah. Then when the summer came around, things slowed down. I was like, my identity isn't being an athlete anymore. I need to find a new identity. And so, not that it should be your career, but that's a lot.
Yeah. Well, I one of the things that we try to teach like our athletes and veterans to think about is like athlete or veteran is more of a title. Your identity is like the personal values that you brought to that athletic career, right? So like as an athlete, maybe you considered yourself competitive, loyal, and hardworking. You can still maintain that athletic identity. You just need somebody to, at some point, and this is what we do, is like teach them how to like point those personal values and that identity at a different target. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
It's hard to kind of let go of that and think of something towards something new. But
So hard. Yeah. I mean, listen, I haven't touched the Stanley Cup because I still think there's a chance I can get a call and potentially win it. So
You never
it's
know.
hard. It's hard. It's hard to let go. The reason I asked the MBA question, by the way, was because like the way I tell people about sales is like, listen, you get a base salary and you get commission to learn how companies operate, how they make decisions, and how they're organized.
Mm-hmm.
So you can go pay, 60 grand a year to go learn those things, or you can get paid 60 grand a year to go learn those things. So we call it like, listen, sales is your paid MBA, full stop. You know what I'm saying?
I'm so glad. I mean, I know of people who went through the program who took different routes that loved it, but I personally also learned best from just being in the field, and I don't think I would have learned that getting my MBA. And I'm glad I took that time to just kind of dive in and figure things out for myself.
Totally, yeah, and I also don't think like MBA right after school. You should getting some business experience prior to getting into the MBA is powerful.
I agree.
My wife's 32. She just got her MBA after having a decent career prior to that.
Yeah.
What I guess like when you look back at that transition to your first sales role at EF, what were like some of the challenges that you had initially getting into sales for the first time?
I think you're kind of like a freshman again after being a senior, and you're used to being really good, and you're used to playing, and you're used to kind of being like one of the top players for most people who are pursuing a career in sales. And so I stepped in and I'm like, I'm a little freshman again. You're carrying the equipment essentially. And I think that for me, it's not that I came in with this like chip on my shoulder, but I had to like really take a step back. And I think it was hard for me to be vulnerable and not do well. Like there were people around me who were a lot better than me. And I don't mean to sound like conceited in that sense, but when you're a collegiate athlete, like you're the best of the best, and to not be like that and to go into an environment where I didn't know anything, like softball was my whole life essentially. That was a very foreign concept for me, but I think I did a good job of just asking questions and not being afraid to fail. It took me like a minute to kind of get used to that because I wanted to perfect it and I wanted to do really well, but I had to accept the fact that like I wasn't going to be the best. And you need to make mistakes and you need to ask questions in order to get to that point. And if you don't do that and you're not coachable, you're not going to get to that point in your career.
I love it. I actually think it's like such a good parallel between sports and not just sales, but like any transition, any like you're starting a new career. I think the rare combination that athletes bring to the table is confidence and like humbleness, meaning like I'm sure you were very confident in your role, but you were also confident as an athlete. But as an athlete, you didn't stop getting better after your freshman year when you started. You kept getting better. So you had the humbleness to like continue to work, but like when the pressure was on, like the confidence to execute. So like I think that's a rare combination that athletes bring to the table when it comes to like hiring new people. That is something that we try to get into people's heads, like that coachability that you talk about, that asking questions. That's the difference between success and failure, in my opinion.
Yeah, I always ask the question in interviews because I just hired like 6 new SDRs, but I'll typically ask them a question of like, tell me a time where you felt hard and you had to pick yourself up, and that to me tells me a little bit about their humility and if they're able to like acknowledge the fact that they failed. So it's a great question, and I recommend everyone kind of preparing for something like that because it really does share a lot about you and who you are.
I love it. Now I have to ask this question because Austin told me about it. You closed an international tour during COVID. Like I need to hear this story. How does that work?
So crazy. So in March, obviously, is when everything started to happen. I was actually in Italy when this was all going down, traveling for work. And I come back and I don't go back into the office. And I was selling international tours to teachers who were taking their students abroad. So maybe like a history teacher taking their students to Rome. And you're not just selling this to the teacher, but like you have to get buy-in from parents, and like what parent wants to send their child abroad, not even knowing when the world's gonna really open up again. And so I was talking to a teacher who wanted to take their students to Japan. in 2 years. So you sell them out 2 years in advance. So we're all thinking like maybe the world will be the same in 2 years. Who knows what's going to happen? But I had to sell like the value of this and what this will teach them coming out of a global pandemic of like, one, this is something to look forward to, but like this isn't going to keep us from seeing the world. And so it wasn't your traditional sell. Like I had to get very creative with it. I wasn't selling her on like, you're going to have a meeting with all the parents. This is what you're going to tell them and you're going to get the students excited. Like that's not how it went. It was more of like, we can overcome this challenge as not just like a country, but as individuals. And we're going to see the world again. And it was so different and it was so challenging, but ultimately like the most rewarding deal I've ever closed. It was the last deal I closed at that company. And I feel like I really went out with a bang, but it was a challenging time. Like it wasn't a traditional sell, as I'm sure you're familiar with, and you had to really find a way around it.
That is awesome. Such a good like feather in the cap, by the way.
It was great. There was a lot of failure that went around this period of time though too. Like I didn't hit my quota one quarter. I had to do a lot of catching up, and I wasn't doing that at first. Like I was just trying to sell, 2 years, we're going to go on this trip and it's going to be awesome. And some people didn't have buy-in, and you couldn't just sell the money value of it. You had to sell like the experience and what they're going to go through. And again, it didn't happen overnight. It definitely took some time.
Yeah, totally. And like that resiliency that got you through that period, through all of us through that period, because every person in sales for that like 6 months from like March to September, it was bad.
It was really bad.
Because there was so much just like uncertainty in the world. No matter who you were selling to, nobody knew what the hell was going on. It was wild. Outside of like your resiliency, your coachability, what were some other skills that you saw translate directly from being, a college athlete into your role as a sales professional?
Yeah, I would say discipline's probably my number one for that. And I think motivation's something that will get you going. I'm a very motivated person, but discipline's something that's going to keep you growing in your career. And that's something that we talked about, having that, like being humble. Even as an athlete, I was motivated, but I was disciplined in the sense of like, I knew I had to show up and give 100% every single day because I needed to grow. There were going to be new players coming in who were going to come at me for my position. I fought for my position every single year. It wasn't just handed to me. I wasn't out there thinking it was mine. Like I know that I had to fight for it preseason, during the season. And that's kind of how I felt in my sales career. Like just because I'm the most tenured rep as an SDR, or maybe more tenured rep, doesn't mean someone's not coming for me in my role and the next promotion. And so it's one thing to have that motivation, but you've got to be disciplined in the sense of like, you need to be hitting your daily metrics. You need to be making sure you're not just doing that, you're doing things outside of the box, getting creative, kind of like how I did during COVID and closing that big deal. Like I could have just gone through the motions and gave up, but like you've got to stay disciplined and make sure that you're not only doing the bare minimum, but going above and beyond as well.
Yeah. And I saw the quote, motivation gets you going, but discipline keeps you growing. That's so true.
Yeah, it does.
And that like bad game, bad call, bad quarter, like that happens all the time. Like you just got to come back with the same vigor and conviction that you had the day before.
Yeah.
So you're in a hiring seat now. I'm sure you're hiring a lot of athletes. What's advice that you would give to, folks that are coming out of, whether it's a college softball career or whatever, getting into the business world? What's some of your advice for those folks?
Yeah, I wish I had advice when I was their age and really looked into this. And I would say networking is something that's going to be really important, and in talking to people about their career and how they got there, and not just where they are currently, but maybe their background. I think that's something that you really want to understand. Like, I didn't really know what was out there until I started networking. I told you I got my first sales job from someone who referred me that was an athlete at Endicott. It doesn't always have to be an athlete, but network as much as you can. And when you're interviewing, I don't know if this is specific to the question, but you're not just looking to see, or you're not just trying to prove to them that you're a fit. You need to also make sure that this company is a fit for you. And when I graduated in my first role, it was an awesome company, and I was a great fit for them, but I'm not sure they were the best fit for me. And I wanted to be somewhere where I was like in a tight-knit community. I went to a small school and I liked the startup world, and that's kind of like what Endicott felt like to me. And so I just felt like I was trying to prove myself to everyone, and I wasn't really looking at the company to make sure that the manager was a fit for me, or that the culture was a fit for me. Like, those are very important things. You're going to spend a lot of time at this new job, a lot of time with your manager and these people that you're going to be working with. So you want to get like a good feel for them and see if their values align with yours as well. So like, before you go into these interviews, make sure that you write down what's important to you, because you could go in blind and just feel overwhelmed by it. But like, is a hybrid model important to you? Is what kind of management style works best for you? Are you feeling that when you're talking to this manager? So it's overwhelming, but I would say make sure you write these things down and understand like what's important to you before you go into them, and really make sure that this company or this manager aligns with what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think, like, to your point, like starting with that networking, having conversations with people before you develop maybe what's important to you, because, like a lot of folks nowadays are like, well, I want to work remote. And it's like, really? Like, you just did Zoom classes for 2 out of your 4 years at least, maybe more, and you have no idea how to act like a human. It might make sense for you to go get around other humans, or they'll make a decision based off like a 5K difference in base salary, and I'm like, that is not like the right way to make a decision this early in your career. The way I describe to look for a leader is like, find someone you admire that you feel like you can learn from. You're not going to be at this company forever, but in 2 years, you have to be able to look back and be like, I got a lot better than when I started, and now I'm in a position to do kind of what I want to do. And that foundation is critical, in my opinion, that the leadership foundation.
I agree. I think a lot of times people chase money. I see it all the time. And sure, we live in like a really challenging economy, but if you chase money and there's no career potential and growth for you, then you're really chasing fast money. But if you talk to someone where there's a lot of career growth, maybe a lower pay, there's more potential for you there. So you've got to like really check in on those things and make sure, like, if career growth is important to you, that you need to make sure that that's available as well to help you out there.
Absolutely. You've had multiple promotions at multiple companies, Chrissy. What do you think is leading to that? Like, what are you doing that's putting you kind of a cut above your peers to get these promotions?
Yeah, I think a lot of times people think like you just need to hit your numbers, especially as athletes. Like, you got your batting average, your fielding percentage, and if that looks great, then that's, on paper you look awesome. But like, how do you work under pressure, or when you're not doing well, what are you doing outside of that? And so I think for me, like, yes, hitting my numbers and performance was a huge part of this, but as I mentioned before, like, I was not afraid to make mistakes or ask questions. Like, I'm the first person to go to a successful SDR or another manager and be like, hey, what are you doing with your team? Like, I would love to learn from you. If you have that attitude or mentality of like, I'm going to stay in my lane, I don't want to collaborate, like, I'm going to be the most successful. Like, sure, you want to be the most successful, that's fine, but like, don't hold yourself to this one lane. Like, ask people for help, and it's okay if you don't know something. You're not going to learn unless you ask. And I would say, like, another big part of it was I was coachable. I love feedback. My manager recently gave me it wasn't harsh feedback, but it was like, hey, you could have done this differently, and this is what the outcome could have been. And I like when people are direct with me, so it was like very direct. But I always ask, like, how did my presentation go? What could I have done better? Sometimes people don't want to hear what they didn't do well. They want to hear what they did well. Same thing when you're an athlete. I was much better in the field than I was at bat, and I would always practice in the field. And anytime I'd have to go in the cage, I'm like, I don't really want to do this today. Like, I want to feel good about myself. So you have to do the hard things that you might not want to do all the time, and that comes with feedback. You have to hear the things you don't want to hear all the time. But that's the only way that you're going to progress your career. So yeah, I think that's pretty much how I got to where I am, and still growing and still looking for that feedback so I can keep moving up the ladder.
There's so much meat on that bone. I always say candor is kindness, right? Like, we've kind of gotten confused over the last few years, thinking that like being nice is being kind. And I actually think that being kind is what's like leading to a lot of mediocrity in the world in general, but especially in the sales domain, right? You've got leaders that are afraid to tell their people the truth, and because of that, nobody's getting better, right? Like, and that's so dangerous, right? Like, you don't have to be a jerk to tell someone like, hey, you should have done this, right? But like, you've got to be candid with them, or you're screwed.
Yeah, and I tell my SDRs all the time, like, I'm going to give you feedback and I'm going to tear this call apart, and I'm doing it because I care about you. If I wasn't doing this, then I'm not a good manager. And, your delivery depends on the person, right? Like, there are some people I'd be like, okay, we got to work on this. Other people are like, hey, you did this well, but like, I need to see improvement here. So if you're not willing to accept that, and it's not really, you're not coachable, and then that's the only thing that's really going to keep you going.
Totally. And like, when we talk about like our alumni after they get a job, once they're like 3 to 6 months in the seat, we open up like a how to get promoted training, and we talk about number one is like metrics and impact. Like, that's going to be like brushing your teeth. Like, you can't get promoted unless you're hitting your numbers, and especially at a startup. Like, you've got to deliver. The second is like continuously getting better, skill development. It's good to get to the number, but it's harder to get promoted if you're also not getting better at the things that you want to eventually do. I think habits, mindset, character, like all these things that are kind of put in an athletic domain, those really matter as a sales professional. So you have to have those in line. Like, you don't want to promote somebody who's a brilliant jerk, right? Like, they have to have good character. And then the last piece goes to the point you made about how to pick that first company. Make sure it's somewhere you can grow, because ultimately you could be the best BDR in the world. If there isn't a business need to add another AE to the company, guess what? Nobody cares that you're a really good BDR. In fact, they're going to want to keep you there as long as they can because they need you. So
exactly,
I love that. Why? So I guess final couple questions here, Chrissy. We're coming up on 30 minutes. We ask everybody these questions. So first one is, why do you love sales?
I love being able to determine my own success, and there are things that are going to be out of my control. But especially as like an individual contributor, and I'll talk about my role in a little bit, but it is the most rewarding role. You could have a really slow month or a really slow week. But it's all about how you overcome that. And it's really challenging. It's like a roller coaster of emotions. I tell everyone, you can't ride that roller coaster of emotions. You've just got to stay in your lane, in that sense. And so I loved being able to determine my own success. And it's hard though too, right? Like, you could have a week where you're like, I'm taking Thursday, Friday off, or I'm taking a week off here or there, but it's what you put into it is what you get out of it. And to me, that's extremely rewarding. But at the same time, it can be challenging when you're not doing well and you're not seeing success. And when those things are out of your hand, it's what can you do? How can you think outside the box to make that happen? Because anyone can hit their KPIs. Anyone can send these emails and craft up this messaging, but it's like, what are we doing outside the box? And seeing that success is so rewarding. Like, when I have an SDR really struggling in an area and they're like, I want to overcome this. And this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to network with this person, that person, whoever it may be. And seeing them find success in that is just truly rewarding in itself. So that's like a good gist of why I do love sales. And you're in control of your own outcome. Like, again, there are some things you can't control, but if you're, again, doing the bare minimum, hitting your dials and emails, like, that's not really going to get you anywhere. You need to make sure, like, when you do go above and beyond, and you see that success and you see that come back, just like when you're an athlete, you can go to practice every day, you can hit the weight room, but like, what are you doing outside of that? That's going to make you successful. And seeing that outcome is just like the most rewarding thing in the world.
So true. So true. Love that. That's a good clip right there. All right. So last question. When I started the company about 2.5 years ago-ish, a little less than that. And I always get the question, JR, why do you only focus on athletes and veterans? And my answer is always the same. It's because I don't need to explain to them what it means to be dialed in. And when I think of the best sales professionals that ever worked for me or that I worked with, the way I describe them is like, oh, she's dialed in. Like, she just gets it. So the question is pretty broad, but like, what does it mean to be dialed in as a sales professional to you?
I think there's a lot that goes into that. When I think of someone who's dialed in, when I'm dialed in, it's not someone who's just doing the bare minimum. Like when I have my SDRs making their dials and sending their emails, like that's like not really, that's like part of your job description. That's like the bare minimum that you can be doing. Someone who's dialed in is like very strategic, someone who shows up every single day, giving up 100%. I feel like that sounds so cliche, but it's not just about showing up. Like anyone can show up to the office, but it's like what kind of energy and what mentality and what kind of, I guess, energy are you bringing to the office that day? Like, are you just showing up, making your dials and emails, slumped over, and just hitting send and saying, like, I hope this works out? Or are you there collaborating with your account executive? Are you there going, thinking outside the box, getting creative? That's someone who's like dialed in. Someone who's not dialed in is someone who, again, just kind of goes through the motions. And when you're an athlete, you go through the motions, like you might not start. But you need to show up every day like it's a game, and give it 100%. And sometimes that's hard, like life happens and things happen outside of work. But it's setting those things aside, stepping in the office and stepping out and have that good work-life balance. But being dialed in when you're there is so important.
Totally. Rest matters for sure.
Yes, yeah.
Amazing. Chrissy, this was an awesome conversation. Thank you so much for giving us your time. We really appreciate it. And good luck in the second half of the year.
Thanks, JR. Great to meet you.
Yep, you too.
This wraps up this episode of Merchants of Change. If you enjoyed this episode, the most meaningful way to say thanks is to submit a review wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're interested in working with us, please come find us at www.shiftgroup.io.